Well, good afternoon and welcome to the first of our series, our 20-minute webinar series. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Liz Scott and I am the CEO of Brighter Strategies. We are a boutique organizational development consulting firm that works with nonprofits and associations to help them improve their operations so that they can better meet their missions. I've got Tim who's on the chat with me today. So if you have any questions as we go through, feel free to post those in the chat and he'll be monitoring that. And then we'll also leave some time for Q&A and discussion at the end. Today's webinar is focused on the DiSC assessment tool. And again, we just wanted to do a 20-minute quick overview to give you some insights into what the tool is and how it might be of benefit to your organization. So the DiSC assessment was started in 1920 by Dr. William Marston, and he was interested in assessing how normal people behaved and interacted with the world around them. So he created this four-dimensional model which looks at four different behavior patterns, which he named dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. The dominance realm really looks at how we address challenges in our life. So how do we respond to problems and different challenges as they present to us? The I, influence, really looks at our contacts. So how do we influence people around us? How do we get other people to see our points of view? S, steadiness, looks at consistency. So how do we respond to the pace of our environment? Some of us are more fast-paced oriented. Some of us enjoy a more leisurely pace to our environment. And so it looks at how we respond to different environments within our world. And then the C, conscientiousness, really looks at constraints. So how do we respond to rules and procedures that are set by others? So let's chat a little bit about why you might use an assessment tool like this and how it's different from some of the other assessment tools that you might be a little bit more familiar with. The DiSC is something that really looks at behavior and emotion patterns. So it provides a very new, there is no good and no bad within the DiSC assessment tool. The purpose of it is to help you understand both yourself, your own behaviors and emotions in different situations, as well as the behaviors and emotions of other people. So the profile provides a framework for looking at human behavior with the intention of increasing your own knowledge of how your behavior patterns influence those around you. So the goal is to gain a better understanding and appreciation of each of the different profiles, again, understanding that they are neutral. There's nothing good or bad in any one of the profiles. It is not meant as a measure of intelligence. It does not look at our personal values. It does not look at skills or experience or education or training. Really what it looks at is behavior. So given a situation, what is our primary or home base, our primary method for engaging with the world? What behaviors do we put out as a primary? And then it also gives us a secondary behavior base. So when we are in a high stress or high emotional situation, what is the secondary behavior that we might revert to? This is a very different tool from some of the other tools that you might be familiar with, or perhaps you've even taken yourselves, most notably the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI. The Myers-Briggs is a personality measure. So the idea behind the Myers-Briggs is that personality is hard-coded at birth. So you can't change your Myers-Briggs type, according to Carl Jung, who was one of the original researchers of the Myers-Briggs. So it's something that can't be adjusted. It cannot be changed because it's hardwired. It's our personality. It's what we're born with. The DiSC is very different because it's really looking at your behaviors. And as we know, we can all control and change our behaviors. We can adapt them given to a workplace or to a particular situation. So what the DiSC essentially says is that you have certain behavioral preferences, but given different situations, you can learn to shift or adjust those preferences so that you can communicate more effectively and more efficiently with others. So from an organizational context, DiSC is a great tool as you start thinking about how do I build a healthier workplace? How do I get people to deal with conflict? How do I get people to work together, be on the same page, and to think about the work from a behavioral perspective? The DiSC assessment has been evaluated many times over. The Spears-Bowman split halves reliability coefficient, which essentially is a psychometric assessment of reliability. If you look at the 4 different components, you can see dominance as an example is at 92%. So 100% would be absolutely perfect from a reliability perspective. So essentially what these numbers tell us is that there's some good science behind the DiSC. It is very, very reliable. The correlation values between each of the D, I, S, and C scores, as you can see, are almost at the 90th percentile and above. A couple interesting points about the DiSC is that, as I mentioned, most people have a preferred style. One of the other research components that has come out of this is that many people actually have a second or backup style. So 78% of people will end up with not just one of these styles, but 2 or more that they feel that they connect to their own behavior. So let's take a minute and do a little bit of a deep dive and jump into what each of these components looks at. And we're going to start with a framework that we'll be using for the rest of the presentation here. So if you look at this grid, what you'll see is that there are some behavior patterns that are shared by each of the different components. So somebody who is high in dominance and somebody who is high in influence, as an example, both of those individuals tend to be very active, they're very fast-paced, they're assertive, they're dynamic, and that can be countered by somebody who's either a C or an S. You can see, for example, they're much more thoughtful, they're moderately paced, they're calm, they're more methodical. If you look at Ds and Cs, they tend to be more questioning, more logic focused, objective, and skeptical, whereas our I's and our S's, they share other behavior traits where they tend to be more accepting, more people focused, more empathetic, and more receptive. And we're going to jump into each of these in a little bit more detail just so that you can get a sense of each of the 4 styles. We're going to start with D for dominance. So people with high levels of D, as I mentioned, tend to be active, they're fast-paced, they're assertive, they're dynamic. They focus on logic, questioning, objectives. They tend to be a little bit skeptical. They like to shape an environment around them where they get to overcome opposition and challenges. So if you say to somebody who's a high D, I've got a problem, I want you to fix it, they're exactly the person who would want to jump in, get immediate results. They want to take action. They would be more than willing to accept that challenge. They are motivated by power and authority. They like to ask good, direct questions. They are fearful of losing control or being taken advantage of. So you'll notice that they tend to be very risk-oriented, very decisive. They have high levels of self-confidence. And their motto would be just do it. Some good examples of Ds that we might see out in the world are people like Martha Stewart or Michael Jordan, people who know what they want, they go after it, and they tend to be very successful. Some of the limitations of our D friends is that they can lack concern for others. They can be impatient. They can also move forward too quickly without thinking about the outcomes. So as a recap for our Ds, they like activity, they like challenges, competition, debate, hard work. They definitely like to be in charge. Some of their dislikes are indecision, people who talk but don't actually produce, activities that don't have a clear goal or outcome, people who they perceive are lazy, they don't like taking orders, and they also don't like slow, boring sorts of events. So some of their strengths on a team is that they can be strong-willed, determined, independent, results-oriented. Some of their weaknesses is they can be cruel, sarcastic, arrogant, and sometimes ruthless. We're going to compare the D to our I's. And as we mentioned earlier, there are some similarities between a D and an I in the sense that they are active, fast-paced, assertive, and dynamic. But where they differ is where a D is much more focused on objective, logical, being skeptical, thinking things through. An I, on the other hand, is much more accepting. They're people-focused, they're empathetic, they're much more receptive. These are people who are connectors. They like talking to other people. They like shaping their environment by persuading and influencing others. They like to involve other people. They like to make a favorable impression. They tend to be motivated by social recognition, group activities. They have deep relationships with other people, and they like to leverage those relationships to help them be successful within their work. They fear social rejection and disapproval, influence. as a result, you'll notice that they tend to be very enthusiastic, they're charming, they're sociable. Their motto would be, don't worry, be happy. They want to get everybody involved together and part of a solution. Some great examples would be Oprah, Ellen DeGeneres, Drew Barrymore. I'm sure you could think of other people in your lives that have good, steady contacts, connections, and they seem to be interested in using those connections to get their work done. Some of their limitations is that they can be impulsive. They can also appear to be disorganized, and they can have a lack of follow through. So these are people who definitely like to connect with others and get other people involved. So there's a lot of exposure to other people. They like a lot of activity. They tend to like short-term projects. They're always on the go. These are people who invented playing golf and selling business. So the whole idea of going out and doing something fun while you're engaging in business, that was created most definitely by an I. They don't like being ignored. They dislike being ridiculed. They don't like being alone or isolated, and they don't like doing repetitive tasks. Some of their strengths on your team is that they are outgoing, enthusiastic, optimistic, spontaneous, they're expressive, and they're incredibly persuasive. So they tend to be good sellers of ideas. Some of the weaknesses on a team, they can be loud, they can be undependable, unrealistic, unfocused, overly excitable, and because they're such good persuaders, they can sometimes be seen as manipulators. We're going to move on now to talk about our S's, so people who score high in steadiness. As I mentioned, they are very similar to influencers in that they are people-focused, they're empathetic, they're accepting, they're receptive. But unlike the I's, they're much more thoughtful, moderately paced, calm, and methodical. So when you think about an S, they like stability. They like to accomplish tasks by cooperating with others. They tend to be calm, patient, loyal, very good listeners. They are motivated by infrequent changes, stability. They really appreciate cooperation and people working together to get things done. So they're highly patient. They're a great team player, very stable. They have good, calm approaches. And their motto would be that they don't rock the boat. So some examples that you might think about are Mother Teresa or Mr. Rogers, people who like to bring people together in a very calm, patient sort of way. Some of their fears include a loss of stability, the unknown, and change. So these individuals do tend to like to think things through and would not necessarily be the first to jump on a bandwagon for something new or different within a team. They like stability, as I mentioned. They like peace. They want to wait and think things through. Having a friendly environment is very important to them, as is teamwork and finishing the job. So they want to make sure that everybody is on board and that everybody is moving in the same direction at the same pace. They dislike people who are insensitive. They dislike misunderstandings that might lead to conflict on a team. They tend to not be a fan of surprises. They don't like to be yelled at or have extreme emotion being pushed towards them. They don't appreciate sarcasm, and they don't like people who are overly pushy. Some of the strengths that they bring to a team is that they tend to be very orderly, they're correct, they're precise, they're analytical, and they tend to be gifted at understanding the emotional contributions of others. Some of their weaknesses is that they can be seen as timid, inflexible, slow, particularly to decide or make decisions, and they can be seen as unmotivated or indecisive because it takes them a little bit more time and a little bit slower pace to think things through because they want to make sure that everything is taking all people and all thoughts into consideration. The last one that we're going to talk about as part of the DiSC model are C's. C stands for conscientiousness. So as we talked about, as similar with the other models, they share with S's this thoughtful, moderate pace, calm, methodological approach, but they also share with D's the interest in questioning, logic, skeptical, being objective. So what this looks like for a C is that they are very quality and accuracy oriented. So they like to work in situations where they've measured twice and they've cut once. They have a great attention to detail, very high standards, strong analytical thinkers. They are very clearly defined performance expectations. So they like environments where they know exactly what needs to be done, what quality looks like, and they value accuracy. work or thinking that they just quickly threw something together. So as a result, they tend to be very cautious, very precise, diplomatic, and restrained in their approach. Some examples of C's we might think of from the media are people like Mr. Spock or Bill Gates or Julia Roberts. So individuals who are very calm, very detail oriented, but also want to make sure that things are done right. So they like consistency, as we've talked about. They like detail. They like excellence. They value creativity, but they want it to be done right and done well. So they tend to like perfection, and they like getting things done in a way that pulls quality together. As a result, they can be seen as being a little overly single-minded in their approach. So they don't like criticism. They don't like being interrupted. They don't like ambition without a plan. They want to make sure that the detail is there and supports the plan. They don't have a lot of tolerance for mistakes or mediocrity. And similar to our Cs, they're not a fan of sudden changes that happen within an organization. So if you think about your C people on your team, some of their strengths is that they're easygoing, they're practical, diplomatic, cooperative, and systematic. So they will definitely think through all of the issues before moving forward with the decision. Some of their weaknesses is that they can be seen as unsociable, inflexible, picky, moody, and sometimes self-centered because they're so focused on things being perfect and being right that sometimes they tend to miss that bigger picture. So we've talked a little bit about these 4 different DiSC types. And so I wanted to take a moment to talk about how your team or your organization could benefit from taking a DiSC assessment. So a couple things to think about here is that DiSC, as I mentioned, is really about learning how our behavior and knowing how that behavior influences other people. So if you think about it from a team environment, it helps team members read each other more easily. It provides a neutral language where team members can think about their own behavior given a situation and work through conflict. And it allows teams to be more successful and think about the work that they're doing. So creating an environment of success where we understand ourselves and our tendencies and how we might want to best work with others, understanding how others behave, and being able to minimize potential conflicts on a team by understanding how we can modify our behaviors to be more successful as we work with our team members. If you'd like to set up a time to talk with us about conducting a DiSC workshop with your organization, please let us know. You can reach out to Tim in the chat box and let him know, or reach out to us after this webinar. Otherwise, feel free to post any questions or comments you might have at this time. We'll take about a minute or 2 for that, and then we'll let you get on with your day. So thank you so much for participating and for being here with us today. And we'll look forward to having you join us at another one of our 20-minute webinars.